What's up, everybody? Welcome to a Friday edition of The Sweat. I am Emerson Lotzia. It's good to have you watching us. It's good to have us watching you. It's good to have week 2 around the NFL officially underway. It's good to have our 3-man panel helping us with some price check. That's right, a panel consisting of more than one human being. Yeah, Reed T. Fowler, DraftKings contributor, and Jeff Ulrich, DraftKings contributor, and RotoWire's AJ Scholes. You guys are here for some price check, your favorite DFS picks in the following price ranges. Your favorite quarterback over $6,500. Jeff, who is it?
It's going to be Russell Wilson this week at right around $7,500. Not right around, right at $7,500, excuse me. And look, I mean, there's a lot of talk about Kyler Murray having a great week. People are on Tom Brady here, but Russell Wilson gets the Tennessee Titans. And one thing we know about teams that play the Tennessee Titans, they like to throw the ball. Teams threw the ball right around 39 times per game against Tennessee, second most in the league last year. And that kind of trickled down to last week as well. They allowed Kyler Murray about 9 yards per pass attempt last year. Kyler, obviously, 5 touchdowns. The bottom line here, this is just a great matchup. It's a great fantasy matchup. Russell Wilson threw 4 touchdowns on 23 passes last week. I absolutely love this matchup. Seattle's got the second highest implied team total right behind Cleveland as well. I think this is just a game where people are almost just going to forget it, that Russ exists. And it's such a good fantasy spot. So I love paying up for him, especially in the big fields.
Okay, Sweet T. Fowler, who do you love paying up for?
Yeah, I think Russell Wilson, last week and this week, I think he's viable. I think he's going on the, last 5 weeks of the previous season and what he did there. So I love that call. But I'm going Justin Herbert. I believe he's $6,700, gentlemen. And look, I mentioned that the underrepresented value in this game, but more and more that I look into it, I'm a little bit worried about that call, Jeff. A little bit worried about my under call in this Dallas Chargers game. Look, Justin Herbert didn't have a great game in week 1. Under 20 DK fantasy points, but now he gets a Dallas defense. He threw 47 pass attempts against Washington. What do we think he's going to do against this Dallas defense? This Dallas defense just allowed the overall QB5 from Tom Brady, who's 76 years old. This young gun who still's got a little bit of blemishes on his face. He's still a young lad in the NFL. I think stacking him with the Chargers receivers, which we'll get to in a little bit, I think it's absolutely fine. I think his ownership goes a little bit under-owned this week because of that week 1 performance, but I love him.
AJ Scholes, your favorite quarterback, $6,500 or more.
I'm going to go right at the $6,500 mark, and I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts here. Look, the 49ers allowed 39.2 fantasy points on DraftKings last week. That was the 3rd most in the league for quarterbacks. So I like the matchup here that Hurts is getting. Racked up 264 yards, 3 TDs. And I think the X factor here is he picked up another 62 yards on the ground, which was second most among QBs in week 1. I think this is a matchup made in heaven for Jalen Hurts here to have another big week.
All right, favorite running back now. We're talking $6,000 or north of that. Sweet T. Fowler, who's your dude?
David Montgomery. I think he's perpetually underappreciated because of how he started his rookie campaign. And look, who knows what Matt Nagy is doing, right, with this entire offense. We do see Damian Williams out-target him, right, last week, 5-1. So that's a little scary. But for tournaments, I think Montgomery is absolutely in play. I mean, look at what he did against the Rams. Over 100 yards on only 16 carries. And this guy in the last 7 games, Emerson, RB6, RB1, RB6, RB2, RB8, 5, and 8. This guy is an absolute monster when it comes to production. And maybe all of the metrics that we saw coming in as a prospect are they're not true, but they're potentially coming to fruition. Cincinnati is a much easier defense than the Rams. So I like Montgomery at 61.
Yeah, dude went off in week 1. Jeff, what about you, dude?
I really like David Montgomery as well. I wrote him up on DK Nation. You can go check that out whenever you want, my article. But
nice.
Another guy I really like paying up for, and I kind of like the fact that his price is up there because I think it's going to keep ownership lower. It's Nick Chubb. I mentioned earlier in the week, if you're expecting another miracle from Houston, don't. I don't think that's going to happen. This is just a bad rush defense. And, obviously Jacksonville couldn't take advantage of it. Trevor Lawrence maybe throwing some too many picks in his first start. But, 4.8 yards allowed on the ground last week. Last year, Houston was the worst rush defense in terms of yards per carry allowed. Cleveland is going to be angry because they let the Chiefs off the hook. We know they're Dennis Green right now. We know who they are, et cetera, et cetera. You know the rant. Nick Chubb should get a pretty big workload here, and I also think the fact he shares carries with Kareem Hunt probably going to keep people off him. But I expect Chubb to get a lot of work because Cleveland, A, can't afford to lose this game, and B, this is their best way to attack Houston. So I love paying up for him here.
Okay, AJ, which running back do you expect to get a lot of work, so you're going to pay out for him?
Yeah, for me, I'm looking at Jonathan Taylor here at 7,200 in week 2. His on-the-ground yardage wasn't great against the Seahawks. He had just 56 yards on 17 carries, but he was targeted 7 times in the passing game. He made 6 catches for 60 yards. Looking at the defensive side here, the Rams allowed 120 rushing yards in week 1. That was 6th worst in the league. They did okay against the pass, but really struggled against the run. I think this is a good opportunity for Jonathan Taylor to take advantage of that.
All right, now we're going to favorite wide receiver over $6,000. Ulrich, I opened that article on the DK Sportsbook here on the DraftKings Nation website, and looks like you're going to throw DK Metcalf in there with Russell Wilson?
I mean, I definitely like that stack. That is a great stack to go. But because we've already talked about the Seahawks, we don't need to talk about them more. Let's go to the other side of that game because part of that stack involves a guy named A.J. Brown. A lot of people concerned about A.J. Brown, the injury issues. He played over 80% of the snaps week 1. He led the Titans in targets. Now he comes to his Seattle secondary. It's still the Achilles heel of this team. They allowed Zach Pascal. They allowed 2 touchdowns to the opposing wide receiver core on Indy. Guys you probably can't even name last week. So this is a very good matchup for A.J. Brown. Again, I already talked about Tennessee. They like to play at a strong pace. But Seattle, they're the classic funnel to the pass defense. They're very good against the rush. They bottled up Jonathan Taylor last week. Could definitely bottle up Derrick Henry here. And I think A.J. Brown, if this game shoots out, going to be a monster one because this is a secondary that simply can't handle A.J. Brown. So I love paying down for him. And then, again, you stack him with the Seattle guys you already mentioned.
Okay, AJ, talk to me. Wide receiver over $6,000.
I'm going to go back to Seattle, as Jeff said here. But I'm going to look at Tyler Lockett. Tennessee absolutely shredded in week 1 by the Bucs, and they really put up, a ton of, gave up a ton of yards. Seattle, for their part, solid 4 touchdown game. Lockett got 2 of those. He caught 4 of 5 targets for 100 yards. I would expect more of the same. Obviously, there's a lot of pieces that can be options here, but I think Tyler Lockett should get plenty of targets and could have another big game.
Fowler, which wide receiver do you think could have a big game?
Yeah, I love both of those Seattle receivers. I'm going to lean a little bit more towards DK Metcalf because I think a lot of people will go to Lockett. And we saw that they got the same amount of targets in that game, in that matchup. And DK Metcalf, he's starting to become my Tony Finau here, Emerson. Like, this guy is like one of my favorite players to watch. He's a monster. But in the risk of just reiterating what we're already talking about, I like Keenan Allen. I mentioned Justin Herbert at the top. Stacking him with the quarterback in Herbert, but even going also with Mike Williams, I think is a solid play. If you look at what Keenan Allen has done with Herbert, averaged 10 targets and 18.6 PPR fantasy points per game last season with Herbert, and at home, 23.3 PPR fantasy points in the 7 games that Keenan Allen was in. Like, this guy is a monster when it comes to targets, and Herbert absolutely loves him. I think he's in for another big game this week against Dallas.
All right, gentlemen, if we're going to be spending up at all of these positions we have already discussed, how about your favorite value play under $4,500? Go ahead, Reed.
I'm gonna go Cedric Wilson, $3,100. I'm just watching this Chargers Dallas game, but Gallup was hurt, and what Wilson saw was 3 targets on 34 offensive snaps. He is a guy that we also saw last year come in and play, and have one big game. Everyone picked him up on the waiver wire, and then he kind of went and ghosted everybody. But against this defense, against the Chargers, like they're better, but it's something that if he gets the full complement of the Gallup snaps, which I don't think he does, but if he even gets 75% of those, I think he can pay up as $3,100, so close to the min price.
Jeff, what about you, man? Save us some cash.
I'm going to go to the Eagles game because, again, I think that's a really good game to target. I know AJ talked about Jalen Hurts. I'm going to go to the other Jalen Reagor, to save some money. Only 4,100, over 70% of the snaps in week 1. The thing I like about what he did in week 1, he not only was he second on the team in targets with 6, but he converted all 6 of those targets into catches. Rager had a really hard time in his rookie year doing that. He had a terrible catch rate. This is much, much better. I think this is going to be a good matchup. San Francisco secondary, definitely not that good. 4,100 for Rager. I think people are sleeping on him a little bit here.
AJ, who do you think some folks out there could be sleeping on for a value play?
Well, I like Michael Pittman. I know I talked about the Rams' pass defense being a little bit better. He's 4,300 here. And you look at the targets in that first game, Hines got 8, Taylor 7. So you're talking about running backs getting the bulk of the targets. Pittman wasn't far off in terms of the wide receivers. 4 targets for him. He had 3 catches for just 29 yards. It wasn't a huge game from him, but I think that only serves to depress his drafted percentage heading into this week. I wouldn't expect to continue to see every single week that the running backs are getting the bulk of the targets here. So eventually the ball is going to go to some of these wide receivers, and I think Pittman's positioned well to get more share as the weeks go on here.
That's right. Yeah, touchdown just went to Pascal there in week 1. You three hang out. Need you for a smorgasbord of other NFL segments scattered throughout the show. But for now, can the Cowboys bounce back against the Chargers on Sunday? Let's ask our Cowboys expert, Nick Eatman.
On the whole, going into a game like that, it's sort of, teams don't like to necessarily have these in week 1, but immediately it's kind of a statement game, obviously, when you're going up against the defending champs. And that was a very winnable game. Again, many would say probably should have won a better kicking game. It's definitely a win. Yeah. So, how much confidence does that instill in the Cowboys, even in spite of the loss?
Yeah, there's not a moral victory at all. And I think that's where that term has been kind of floated out a little bit. And I think once you start accepting losses and getting excited about them, then you have a problem. But I do think, like you said, there's something to be encouraged about. And I think the advantage that the Cowboys have versus other teams is other teams can be excited about their wins. There's 16 teams with a win. They can be excited about them, but you still don't know who you really played, and you don't know who you are. I think the Cowboys have the best idea of who their opponent is than anybody else, because you're talking about the defending champs that returned everybody, and they've got Tom Brady, which you know exactly what Tom Brady's going to be right now. So, we all know the Bucs are going to be there, and the Bucs are going to be good. And so that it's a very good benchmark game for the Cowboys. There's going to be a lot of teams in week 2 that either won or lost that will flip the script and surprise their fan bases. Cowboys could be one of them if they go and play poorly against the Chargers. But I just think that this is a good sign, an arrow pointing up, that if you play like that, you're gonna have a lot more success than you did last year.
Cowboys have the Chargers on the road in week 2. LA coming off a narrow win against Washington in its opener. So what's the outlook for Sunday?
Well, I mean, it's going to be an awesome atmosphere. It's the second time they play at SoFi Stadium, first time with fans. So it'll be a little bit louder, I'm sure. This is the first game with fans for the Chargers at home. So we'll kind of see. But I do think there'll be a lot of Cowboy fans there. I think it'll be a good atmosphere. And like I say all the time, week 2, to me, is always the biggest game of the season, even bigger than game 1. And for me, for all teams, if you win, you need to make sure and build off that. You don't want to be in that 1-1, because that gets you to 8-8, Bill, as the Cowboys have done so many times. You want to be in that 2-0. And if you go 0-1, you certainly don't want to go in the 0-2. So I always put a lot of emphasis in the week 2 game, and especially if you lose. And I think that this will be a big one for the Cowboys, but it won't be easy, because you're facing quarterback and an offense passing game, Keenan Allen and Herbert and all those guys, and then Joey Bosa on the other side is probably licking his chops to think whoever they're going to start at right tackle. So it won't be an easy game, but I think if they play the way they played the other night, I think they certainly can win.
Before I let you go, just because you had brought up expectations for this team overall, and the fact that even feeling better about them 0-1 than necessarily 0-0 going into the season, I'm sure you had a week 1 loss penciled in against Tampa. So what was your prediction going into the season for the year?
I had them in around the 10-7 range, and that's probably where I still would have them. I think if you would win that game, you'd be thinking better. Everybody would have been thinking better than 10-7 if you beat Tampa Bay, and that's how close they were. But 10-7, I'm going to stick with that. I'm not sure if that wins the NFC East. It certainly would have last year, but divisions go like that. It'll when everybody's bad, then there'll be years when everyone's good, and I don't know if we're at that point yet. but I bet we're at a point where they're going to be a lot more competitive this year. So, it's going to be tough. At 10-7 could be a dogfight to get there.
All right, we're back here live on The Sweat, everybody. And so are DraftKings contributors Reed Fowler, Pierce Dietrich, and Kenny Ducey right now, everybody. Kenny Ducey is playing injured. He's a man. He continues to overcome adversity. Kenny, just really quick, just in case you're not your total self today, what is wrong with you with your hand?
That's such a loaded question. We could have the whole segment talk about what's wrong with me. No, I sliced my finger open. I need to get stitches on the knuckle connecting my index finger to my hand. It's a very tragic incident. I was just cleaning a knife and needed to walk across the street. Luckily, I live right across the street from a hospital to get stitches.
We all know that is a hospital you bum their Wi-Fi off of for these shows.
Yep.
Well, anywho.
So that's baked into the cost.
T's and P's to you, my friend. It really sucks that we're not going to be able to play golf with you here in a couple weeks. But let's go ahead and get to NFL high or low here. Are these sportsbook lines too high or too low? One of the highest game totals right now is Cowboys-Chargers. You just heard Nick Eatman chatting about it a little bit. 54.5. Is that too high, Kenny?
I think that it's a little bit too high. The Chargers did a good job on defense last week. Of course, they had one of the more talked about bad defenses last year, blowing all those leads. And the Cowboys, while they are down there in DVOA from week one, I did feel like they played some semblance of defense against a very good Tampa Bay offense to keep the Dallas Cowboys in that football game. This is just a very, very high number in general, and I think it's a massive overreaction to a season where, we've seen the Cowboys for a few years now have a pretty terrible defense, and last year the Chargers were pretty bad. Even if just one of these defenses shows up, and LA's did last year, I think that we could definitely keep it under 55.5. It's a very, very high number for me, and I think it's worth taking a look at.
Okay, is it worth taking a look at, in your eyes, Reed, too high or too low?
Yeah, early money was coming in on the under, but DeMarcus Lawrence, he's not going to be in, so that does scare me a little bit in terms of what the Chargers are going to be able to do. But I'm with Kenny here. I think it is a little bit too high, probably a point too high. But look, and like the earlier segment, right? Like I love all of these pieces on the DFS side in this matchup. So yeah, can this go over? We've seen Dallas give up a ton of points. What we saw last season, their first 4 or 5 games, they just were in shootout after shootout after shootout. I do think that it is sort of a stay away in terms of over-under. But at the same time, if you wanted to, for this segment, I would say it's a little bit too high, but I'm a little tepid in saying that.
Okay, which side are you on here, Pierce?
I know it's a big number, but it's too low. Dak's last 5 games, the average total is 71 points. We're talking about 54. They're going to 71 routinely. And it's mainly because Dallas's defense is bad. They're held together by stitches. And so, it puts the offense in some pretty rough spots. And the offense has really had no trouble, scoring points. Plus, their offensive line is going to be healthier now that Zach Martin's back. I don't doubt the Cowboys offense, and I don't doubt that the Chargers offense can score against Dallas. So give me the over.
What do you want here, Pierce? Lowest game total right now, Patriots-Jets, 43. Too high or too low?
I think it's too low. Damian Harris is going to cut through this defense like a knife through Kenny's hand.
Ooh, this is amazing.
Here.
I was warned he was going to come out with puns all day. So
you are doing the Lord's work, Pierce.
So these defenses, I think, are a little bit overrated after last week. New England looked good, but I don't really have much faith in the Miami offense with Tua. They're just not consistent. They're not proficient. And then obviously the Carolina offense has struggled for the last 2 seasons under their new offensive coordinator. They're not getting any better. So that's made these defenses look better than they are. And then on the flip side of that, you've got 2 rookie quarterbacks going into their second game. I don't foresee that there's going to be any developmental changes, but comfort level, there should be a huge step forward for these 2 quarterbacks. And also they'll be very aggressive. That should mean a lot more points.
All right, Kenny, how about you, dude?
Yeah, look, I mean, Pierce said aggressive, and that was a much different team in the second half of that game. The New York Jets, 14 points. Zach Wilson looked much more comfortable throwing the football. He was daring with the football all game long. And when you look at the numbers from last week, the Jets were 28th in rush play percentage. So that tells me that they are going to be throwing the football quite a bit now. this Russian defense is pretty good. This has been the last 2 years now. I mean, this is what the Jets are known for, what they're memed for, is only drafting defensive linemen, only drafting run stoppers. They don't build any of the rest of their team. So it's really the one thing that they can do well. And I think Damian Harris is a very good runner. I'm very high on him. But I do think that the Patriots would be wise here to throw the football a little bit more. They did run the 12th most last week, the Patriots. I think that we see a little bit more passing. You have to attack. The Jets came into the season with a secondary by committee. So I think you want to throw the football against these guys. You don't know who's back there. It's hard to pass. I think that this will go over. I think it's going to be a very pass-happy game. And I think that it could be a fun shootout between two exciting young quarterbacks.
Okay, Reed, neither team scored more than 16 points in week 1.
Yeah, but kind of like last night, Emerson, when you see teams going on the under in those first weeks, it's an overreaction, right? It's an overreaction for both these teams. I'm with the guys here. I'm with, especially with Pierce with those puns, man. Amazing work here. I'm going over. And I think a big thing too, Kenny, is Mekhi Becton being out on the Jets line. That's going to hurt. And we see what it does, right, to the over-under. We see what it does to the spread, that when these key offensive linemen are out, and especially Amy's out for the year with a knee, with an ACL or an MCL, that's going to be tough. I do think that the Patriots do have the advantage here on the passing side. And I also think that we might see some points on the defensive side from the Patriots. And so I do like the over. I think this is too low.
Yeah, no question. Pierce is a cut above the rest.
Oh, I need to pick it up here.
3 games with a double-digit spread here. Houston, Cleveland, that's 12.5. Atlanta, Tampa Bay, 12.5. Detroit, Green Bay, 11.5. Any of these spreads too high, Reed?
Too high? I mean, maybe the Cleveland one, but saying that just gives me, it makes me queasy. Like if I saw the tendon of my finger after slicing it open.
Ooh.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
That was terrible.
My God.
Hit the fail stamp.
him.
Come on, Cody. Thank you. No, I think that one's probably too high. The one I like the most to cover, though, is the Green Bay one. I think with Cleveland, like which Cleveland team is going to come out, right? Like come out and perform. It's Houston. I know that. I get it. But we've seen Cleveland kind of play down to their competition. We don't see Tampa Bay doing that. Maybe again we see it gets them, it gets them a little to get going. But they showed no rust in week 1. Tampa Bay did, and Green Bay might be on a revenge tour after last week. So the Cleveland Browns maybe, but again, it's the Houston Texans.
What about you, Kenny?
Yeah, this is really weird. Cleveland was actually the team I looked at first. I do think that it's pretty funny. Like they have Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney now. So people just immediately assume like that's a really good defense. That's a really good team. Like, do we forget that the Chargers had Joey Bosa last year and still were a terrible defense? Like you can be terrible even with the good pass rush. So look at the Washington football team last night. So I do think that Houston, after a decent showing in week 1, they could certainly cover that spread. I think that's a few too many points, but I'm looking at this Detroit Green Bay game. Look, I know that, the Niners kind of let the foot off the gas pedal, but Detroit threw 57 times with Jared Goff, and he threw pretty well. He almost got up to 350 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. This is an offense that looks surprisingly confident, and we know that Green Bay is not known for its defense. Even getting rid of Mike Pettin just really hasn't seemed to change much. So I think that the Detroit Lions could actually score some points here. I think they're not getting enough credit here, not getting enough respect with 11.5.
All right, well, Pierce, Browns favored by 12.5 against Houston. How about this? Should that line hold, it would be the largest spread in the Browns' favor since the franchise returned to Cleveland in 1999.
All the lines are right. These defenses are bleeding points, just like Kenny's finger. So,
yes.
I'm interested in Houston because Tyrod Taylor and Brandon Cooks, they complement each other. I'll talk more about that later in the game or later in the show, but those two alone aren't enough to cover this spread. And I disagree with Detroit. A lot of those numbers are garbage points against soft prevent defense. They're not going to be in that situation. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball. Plus, Tyrell Williams is dealing with concussion protocol. DeAndre Swift didn't practice the other day, so I can't support any of these underdogs.
Sunday Night Football, gentlemen, Chiefs, Ravens. KC is favored by only 3.5 here after a close win. Is this spread too low after what we saw from both teams last week, Kenny?
I think it's a little bit too low. And I just look, here's the scary part about backing the Chiefs against the spread, right? They were not a good team against the spread last year, and they didn't cover in week 1 because they don't really seem to put the foot to the pedal here when it comes to putting their opponents to rest. I mean, I think that they kind of let opponents hang. That's why they had some shocking losses last year, like to the Raiders. And I think that when you look at this team, it's just a much better team than the Ravens. And the Ravens defense really disappointed me in week 1. I think that Lamar Jackson should have a good game here, but I think any time that you can get the Chiefs under 4 points, I think that that's probably a safe play. But I think anything over 4 points is generally a stay away from me, just because they do seem to play a lot of these close games. They're against the spread records pretty bad. And when you look at Andy Reid's game planning, at the end of these games, they're not looking to get an extra score, get an insurance score. They want to run as much clock as possible with CEH. So that's normally not a formula for a cover. But I think when you look at last year, what happened with these two teams, the Chiefs just absolutely blew the Ravens out of the water. I think that happens again here. They're going to be out for a vengeance here after last year getting disappointed in the Super Bowl. I think that they come out hot.
All right, Pierce, the Chiefs punked the Ravens in Baltimore last season.
I would imagine that the Chiefs will do the same thing. This number is too low. You look at last week, the Browns have a decent secondary, and they couldn't contain Tyreek Hill or the Chiefs. The Ravens, not necessarily a weakness, but they had an average secondary last season, and now you've got Marcus Peters is out. Jimmy Smith was questionable last week. He didn't play, may not play this week. Marlon Humphreys is questionable. Chris Westry is questionable. They have a starting defensive end that's probably not going to play. The linebacker might be out. There's a lot of problems on this Ravens defense, and we got a glimpse of that the other night when the Raiders had no problem scoring points. The Chiefs shouldn't have any problem scoring points. I'm out of puns, sorry.
Yeah, it's all good, man. That was the last question for you in this segment anyway. But Reed, bring us home here. Too high or too low, the spread?
I think this is too low. Look, I get what Kansas City, like their ATS numbers last year, and that kind of scares you a little bit. But they've had the Ravens number for quite some time. And if you take a look at what the Ravens did with the Raiders, they blitzed a ton. And Patrick Mahomes has a 93.3 PFF grade against the blitz since he's been in the NFL. That's the highest grade of any quarterback. And when you have Tyreek Hill, who had a good game last year against the Ravens, and you have Travis Kelce, who could get the Darren Waller type production, which I don't think so. I don't think you need to. I think this is a little too low. I think with the Baltimore Ravens, they this is sort of a critical moment for them, and going down 0-2 to begin the season is going to be pretty tough. But I think this is too low.
All right, gentlemen, all three of you were extremely sharp, extremely on point. Anywho, we'll talk to all of you guys a little later in this show. For now, I did just finish up listening to the Unreasonable Odds podcast, this whole podcast, because Steve Buchanan and Julian Edlow, they both told me exclusively that they would be talking about dogs. So if betting on underdogs is your thing, the Unreasonable Odds guys, they have Dave Sharpin of the favorite underdogs, their favorite ones this week. They're going to talk about it.
Everybody's picking their favorite underdog. This is not just, this doesn't have to be a best bet or anything. You don't have to say you're betting it, but a week 2 underdog that you think has the best chance outright, we're going to say. So you like the points and you like the money line. And I hinted at this one a little bit earlier. I think I know you guys might both be on the same page with this one. I'm thinking Eagles, but I am looking at the Carolina Panthers at home with the New Orleans Saints coming off showing everybody just how good they are. Everybody loves the Saints here. After they destroy the Packers, Jameis Winston's going to win MVP, 5 touchdowns, blah, blah, blah. I got smoked on that game. That was a learning lesson game for me. The look ahead line here was a pick. I got Carolina plus 4.5. I scooped a 4.5. I scooped a 4, bought the hook, and got it to 4.5. I really think that this Saints team, if we know Jameis Winston and like Sean Payton, the Saints coming into this year were, I think it was 2-12 against the spread in their last 7 week 1 and 2 games. They obviously won and covered week 1 this season. They're not good early in the year. The Saints are going to go like this. They don't have any receivers. The defense is falling apart now. Lattimore, best corner, is going out. They'll get Roby in from the trade, his first game with the team, I think. Panthers at home. I overreaction. I think the Panthers can get this one.
Like it.
All right.
Like it.
Fair
Who's
enough.
next?
Dave, you go, and then we'll hear from Steve.
All right. Well, I mean, I think the Ravens are live to win the game. I really do. But we already broke that one down. So
I thought you'd be going Baltimore or Philly, two places we already hit on.
Yeah. So we already hit those, and I like both of those. But I'm gonna go with the Miami Dolphins. I think. I mean, this is one of those games where I'd be sitting in a book all week going, Buffalo can't go 0-2. You know, I'm taking Buffalo.
Yeah.
Why can't Buffalo go 0-2? Did you see?
Yeah.
I mean, they were a disorganized mess. It was a very uncharacteristic Buffalo type of game. But them going to Miami in September, you boys have been there. I've been there. It's hot, sticky, nasty. It's different. And the Dolphins have been there. I just think that this game is going to stay within the number. And when I like a team to stay within the number, I think they can win the game. So I like Miami. I think they're definitely live to win the game. I think it's going to be one of them ugly games where they're going to muddy it up just like they did against New England. And you watched it as well. I think that's the team that I want to use in this segment, Miami Dolphins.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm still rolling with the Eagles in this one.
Yeah.
Just love what they saw last week. I know it was against an opponent that they should be beating up on. But the 49ers, I think, are going to be beatable. If they're relying on Jimmy Garoppolo to have to throw the ball 30 plus times, that's where the problems start creeping in. And that's where I start to worry about the 49ers, because we've seen that when he needs to throw and he needs to make a throw, 8 times out of 10, it doesn't usually work out in the 49ers' favor. So I really like the Eagles in this one. Surprised that they're 3-point dogs, and I'd take that one. Absolutely.
All right, let's talk some best bets now. The NFL flavor of this show continues. DraftKings contributor Pierce Dietrich, he's back. Jeff Ulrich's back. RotoWire's AJ Schultz is back. Gentlemen, your favorite bets for week 2 of the NFL season. Can you believe it? We're already here, week 2. 7 home underdogs. Who is your favorite to cover, Jeff?
Yeah, I honestly, I'm not in love with any of the home underdogs this week, but one team I am tired of betting against is the Miami Dolphins. And, they're sitting there at +3. I would much rather this be +3.5 if you got on it early in the week. But, oh, man, I mean, this is a team that's 7-1 against the spread last year as the home team. Again, going down to Miami, we know the classic. It's kind of tough. People get distracted. And the Dolphins have always been a bit of a tough road game. And now you've got a division game against Buffalo. Yes, Josh Allen is the best quarterback in this game. But one thing about the Bills, and I mentioned this preseason, it is tough for these teams that really overperformed in 2020 to now follow that up in 2021. I'm not suggesting that I'm against the Bills, or I don't think that they're eventually going to turn this around, but we saw them struggle last week against Pittsburgh. This was not the team we necessarily saw last week. Now they get another tough defense who's very, very opportunistic. Miami getting key turnovers when it happens. I don't want to bet against this team. And ipso facto, if they're getting points here as the home team, I want to take them. I'm expecting a close, slow game. Give me the points with Miami here.
All right, Pierce, which underdog is your favorite to cover this weekend?
Philadelphia +3. They're not getting any respect after a dominant performance against the Falcons. I know the Falcons aren't great, but still, Philadelphia looked really good. They have a solid front 7, may not be the greatest, maybe getting a little old, but still good. Their secondary's improved. Darius Slay, we want to write him off, but he had a really good week last week, so he could come out playing well. And then look at San Francisco. There's a lot of question marks there. I don't really know what to make of the quarterback situation. They are starting a backup running back. I know people like the running backs in DFS, but the reality is this is a backup running back, Brandon Ayuk. There was rumors that he was going to struggle, and he didn't show up in Detroit. And you look at what this team did last week offensively, Jalen Hurts, there could be a lot of potential here.
All right, AJ, how about you? Which of the 7 underdogs you like?
Absolutely agree with Pierce's call on the Eagles, but I also really like the Colts here. I just got through our previous segment talking about being high on Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman in this game. So the Colts at +3.5 is a great spot to land, I think, in these week 1 matchups. The Rams D really struggled against the run in their first week, and I think Taylor and Hines could absolutely shred them this week.
All right, guys, which game is a lock to go over? Pierce.
I'm just going to stick with the Chargers and the Cowboys. I know it's a big number, but it's a big number for a reason. The Cowboys' offense looks good, and their defense is terrible. That's pretty much the recipe for an over. The Chargers should bounce back. And last week they had a tough road matchup. Their offense should get going here. The only way I see this getting spoiled is if the Chargers defense has a good game. Their secondary looked good last week, but you would expect their secondary to look good against a backup quarterback being thrust into a game, and then Curtis Samuel was also out. I expect a lot of points from the Cowboys and the Chargers.
That's a 54.5 point total right now on the DraftKings Sportsbook. AJ, which game is a lock to go over?
I'm looking at 49ers Eagles here. Game total coming in at 49 right now on the DK Sportsbook. I think between Jalen Hurts possibly having another strong performance against a questionable San Francisco pass D. You've also got an Eagles team that wasn't great against the run in their first contest, and this is an opportunity for Mitchell to prove that week one wasn't just a fluke. So I think 49 should be an easy mark for these two teams to hit.
All right, and Jeff, what about you, dude?
I like the over in the big game totals too. I think these game totals are too low. Again, we saw early in the season last year, the defense has struggled. The overs had a great record in the first 3 weeks. I think it's a similar story here. The game totals are too low for these matchups. I like both the ones the guys mentioned. I'm going to go back to Seattle and Tennessee and take the over there, though. I'm just not sure how this doesn't hit. Maybe we get a stinker performance from the Titans offense again. But again, like, let's remember, this was a top 4 offense from last year. All the same pieces are there. They're going to figure it out. Seattle is classic Seattle. They love to get ahead, and then their secondary just lets the other team throw the ball around the yard. So at the very worst, you're probably going to get more garbage points from Tennessee. We know Russell Wilson is playing at a high level. I've already gone over how bad the Tennessee secondary played last week, allowing a ton of yards to Kyler Murray on not even that many pass attempts. I think this one goes over for sure. I know it's a big total, but all the ones the guys mentioned, I think really, really good offensive setups. And again, offenses tend to dominate in the first couple weeks here.
Hey, AJ, looking at the DraftKings Sportsbook here, what's your favorite prop bet?
Well, I absolutely can't believe I'm saying this, but Aaron Rodgers to throw an interception against the Lions is coming in at plus 195. Wow. I know the Lions aren't good, but that's just too much value to pass up on. Like, it was so clear in the first week that Rodgers and his receivers are not on the same page. And I don't think, one more week of practice is necessarily going to fix that. Do I think the Packers are going to win this game? Absolutely. Do I think there's a good chance Rodgers could throw another interception? At plus 195 value, I certainly do.
Yeah, threw 2 of them last week, baby. Jeff, what about you, man? Favorite prop bet right now on the DK Sportsbook?
AJ just trying to motivate Aaron Rodgers, I think, was the bulletin board material here.
Absolutely.
I'm going to stick with the Tennessee-Seattle game and keep picking on this. I'm going to go over on A.J. Brown's receiving total. It's sitting at 70.5 or 71.5, actually. May have just moved. But regardless, I mean, I think this is 10 yards too low for A.J. Brown in this game. Again, we know the Seattle secondary is where they struggled. They allowed a bunch of garbage time to the Colts receivers once they got up in that game. And regardless, this is A.J. Brown. I mean, this thing could hit on one catch and pass. And I love targeting receiving totals that I think are a little bit too low with players like A.J. Brown. They got great yards per reception totals. So I think this matchup screams fast pace. I think this matchup screams Tennessee's passing game has a good day. And A.J. Brown, I like going over on his receiving total.
Pierce, which prop bet are you targeting on the DK Sportsbook?
Brandon Cooks over 61.5 yards. He is a deep threat burner. Tyrod Taylor is known as one of the deep ball passers in the NFL. And we saw last week, 7 targets. It was 5 catches for 132 yards. And that was in a bad game script. They were up 21 or 20 points at half. This week, they're supposed to be trailing. They're double-digit dogs. They're going to pass a lot. So there should be even more volume, even more deep passes down the field. And he doesn't have to get 130. He just has to get halfway there. And last week, it was against a decent quarterback in C.J. Henderson, who was a top pick, supposed to play well. Meanwhile, the Browns were terrible in the secondary last week. I love this over.
All right, let's bring it home here, boys, with your slate-approved picks. So your favorite bet on this Sunday slate, Week 2, Jeff.
Going against my guy AJ here, and I hate it, but oh my God, why are the Rams only -3.5 favorites here? Let me give you the injury list for the Colts. Darius Leonard did not practice. Quentin Nelson, no practice. Rhodes still not practicing. Eric Fisher's now limited. Jack Doyle not practice. These are key players for the Colts, really key players. And look, why are we giving Carson Wentz so much credit here when they just got stomped by another NFC West team? The Rams might be better than the Seahawks now, and they're still only -3.5 after what Matthew Stafford did. This is a Jared Goff line and you've got Matthew Stafford coming to town, man. The Rams here way too low. Give me them to cover.
AJ, go ahead, man.
I'm going to look at another QB prop here, and this one's going to be Kansas City's Patrick Mahomes over 2.5 passing touchdowns to come back with plus 110 value on the DK Sportsbook. Look, Baltimore's DBs were sliced up worse than Kenny Ducey's hand to the tune of 409 passing yards in the first game of the year, and that was Derek Carr putting up 2 touchdowns for him. I think Mahomes easily gets that third, could even push for a fourth in this one. I love that over prop on TDs.
Piers, have at it, man. Slate approved pick.
Patriots minus 5.5 over the last 20 seasons. Belichick after a loss is 52-29. The last time that they lost, the next week they beat the Jets. That was last week at week 17, and they covered the spread against the Jets over the last 10 years. He's 18-3. Now he's only 9-12 against the spread against the Jets over that span, but only four times was the spread under a touchdown. Yeah, it's hard to cover the spread when you got to win by 32 points. If this thing continues to stay under a touchdown, I love the Patriots here.
Gentlemen, awesome work this morning. Appreciate it. Big week 2 ahead. We will talk some MLB price check, some DFS chatter on tonight's baseball slate right after a Modelo beat the bus week 2 preview.
Jerome Bettis here. Welcome to this week's Breakdown with the Bus, presented by Modelo.
That's right, Jerome. Adam Kaufman. He is Reed T. Fowler. We're taking a look at the DraftKings Week 2 Sunday main slate. Reed, of course, in honor of the bus, the longtime Steelers running back, Jerome Bettis. Let's start with the running back position. I need your favorite one for this weekend slate.
Yeah, I'm going to a Steelers running back this
Weird.
week. Yeah, Naji Harris. If you take a look at what the Raiders gave up to the Ravens backfield on Monday night, 21 total carries, 2 total touchdowns as well. Naji Harris, why we liked him in season long, why we like him in DFS is he gets all of the carries in that backfield. The Steelers, they get the rest advantage. I do think that Naji Harris, even after a less than stellar performance last week, he can actually get into your lineups and produce against the Raiders. That great on the defensive line again on Monday night, but still I think a little bit of a deficiency defending the run.
Jerome didn't ask you to do that, did he?
No, he didn't.
Okay, good. He's good. He's an impressive player. Let's look at the whole slate here. One game in particular, Reed, that you think could produce a whole lot of fantasy points, a whole lot of points in general.
Yeah, other than the games, Koff, that we see in the mid-50s in their game total, and then the Steelers and Raiders, who I do think are going to have a high-scoring game, I think it's that Minnesota and Arizona matchup that we have. Both teams can pass the ball. We know both teams have good backfields as well. And if Kyler does what he can do on a daily basis, week over week, this is going to be a high-scoring game. I actually like this to go over. One of those stinky games that can go over.
Really talented team there, Arizona. He is Reed. I am Adam. Thanks for watching the Breakdown with the Bus, presented by Modelo.
All right, guys, back here, last segment of this Friday edition of The Sweat. We're going to poke over to the diamond for a little bit, some DFS chatter around the Major League Baseball slate. We got DraftKings contributor Kenny Ducey here. We got RotoWire's Eric Holterman here as well. So we're price checking here, dudes. Your favorite DFS plays in the following price ranges. Eric, start me out with your pitcher who's going to cost at least $8,000 or more.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones at the top of the slate tonight, but I don't know how many more opportunities I'm going to get to gush about Logan Webb this season, so I'm going to do that now. Everything he's done seems to be for real. There's almost nobody like him in baseball history, at least from what we can see. So we have ground ball data on Fangraphs, goes back to 2002. There's only been 30 pitchers who've thrown at least as many innings as he has while having a ground ball rate as good as his 61.1% mark. Almost all of them, as you would expect, are low strikeout guys. They average only a 17.3% strikeout rate. He's the highest among that group at 26.2%. Almost nobody even comes close. One of the closest seasons to what he's done this year is actually Dallas Keuchel's Cy Young year in 2015. But even that year, Keuchel didn't have the same strikeout rate, 23.7%, 2.5 points below. So basically, we're talking about peak Dallas Keuchel with more strikeouts is what Logan Webb has been this season. He's facing an Atlanta team that's not an easy matchup, but they're pretty middle of the pack in terms of offense. And again, I'll take Cy Young, Dallas Keuchel with more strikeouts against just about anybody, especially at a pitcher-friendly park in San Francisco.
All right, Kenny, you got a good chunk of dudes to choose from here.
Yeah, we got a lot. And this might be the boring answer, but I do like paying all the way up for Zach Wheeler here. It has been a little bit of a scary sight for him over the last, 2 months, but he seems to be coming back down to earth, and coming back down to earth for Zach Wheeler is pitching like the NL Cy Young. Just one earned run in his last 2 outings, 5 hits apiece, 17 total strikeouts over 12 and 2/3 innings. And when you look at his career against the New York Mets, he just owns them. Emerson, he's pitched against 7 times against the Mets, 2.72 ERA, 7.33 strikeout to walk ratio, 44 strikeouts and 49 and 2/3 innings. He knows this team very well. He used to play for them. He is 10.6K, which is a lot of money, but I think that given every individual matchup that he has against the Mets, he has been very, very solid against them all. I think that he has what it takes tonight to have a pretty good start, quiet this Mets team down. And when you look at Taijuan Walker on the other side, he might be a little injured. He's having issues lately. The Phillies coming off that ridiculous win. I think that he has a pretty good chance to win this game outright as well, get you some more points that way.
Kenny, a lot of pitchers over 8K, as you mentioned, to choose from. But with all 30 teams in action on this 15-game slate, a lot of pitchers under $8,000 to choose from as well. So who was your guy there, Kenny?
A lot of them, yeah, they aren't really that appealing. So I'm going to go with Adrian Hauser at $7,100. Now, the Cubs, they have learned to hit lately, but if you saw, last night's game, this is a team in full tank mode right now. They don't have that many major league caliber players at hitting the baseball. When you look at Adrian Hauser, he's just a start removed from a complete game shutout. He's been very, very solid. He's thrown over 100 pitches in each of his last 2 outings, which is a telltale sign that, while you do see that RP next to his name, he should be pitching deep into this game. And what I'm looking at closely is he's had over 10 ground balls in each of his last 2 starts. Chicago, a pretty extreme ground ball team, over 42% of the time, ball going on the ground. So I think that this is a pretty good formula here for potentially a win, potentially 6 good innings from Adrian Hauser, maybe even better. He's figured out how to pitch, and it's not very difficult to pitch to this Cubs team. I'm not too concerned with, all the runs they scored last night against Matt Moore. I think that that this lineup comes back down to earth here. Adrian Hauser is a pretty good deal at 7,100.
Eric, which pitcher under $8,000 is appealing to you?
Yeah, the cheap guys tonight are cheap for a reason, unsurprising. There's really only 2 that I had any interest in. Hauser's one of them, and the other would be Eliezer Hernandez at 6,800 against the Pirates. It's been a rough year for Hernandez. He landed on the 60-day injured list after both of his first 2 starts. Bicep the first time, skipped over the tricep straight to the quadricep the second time. But since there's no pentacept or hexacept that I'm aware of, I think he should be fine the rest of the way. In the starts that he has made, 4.14 ERA seems more or less deserved. That's nothing special. Combines basically a league average strikeout rate with a very low walk rate of just 4.4%. The main reason I'm interested in him, though, is because he showed something last year, similarly very low walk rate with a very high strikeout rate. It came over just 6 starts, but 32.1% last year is really something. Hasn't quite shown that this year, but if there's ever a time to be against a Pirates team that ranks second last in WRC plus on the season and last since the trade deadline, and he'll be facing them at a very friendly park down in Miami. So I think it's a great situation for a guy who has at least shown something in the past, which is not something you can say for most of today's inexpensive arms.
What about dudes who can swing good wood? Eric, a hitter over $4,500.
Yeah, I'm going to go near the bottom of that range because I think I'd be paying up for probably 2 pitchers unless, again, I go with Hernandez tonight. And that'd be Carlos Correa at 4,700. He's swinging a hot bat lately. In his last 12 games, 3 homers, 12 RBI, hitting 306 over that stretch. And really all season, it's been very encouraging for him. He's shown almost as much power as ever. Hit his 23rd homer of the season last night. That's just 1 shy of his career high. But perhaps even more encouraging is his plate discipline is the best we've ever seen it. 18.6% strikeout rate is his best mark since his rookie season back in 2015. He's combined that with a career high 12.2% walk rate. So he's seeing the ball as well as ever. He'll face Madison Bumgarner, who's coming off 3 straight starts in which he gave up 5 earned runs. And actually, if you look over his last 4, his fastball is down to just 89.3 miles per hour. That's more than a tick below the 90.6 mile per hour it was over his first 19 outings. So it seems like he's fading down the stretch and hasn't really been impressive overall this season. 4.66 ERA. So pretty great matchup for a guy who's been good all year and especially lately.
Kenny, which hitter are you paying up for?
I'm going with another Astro, Jose Altuve at $5,000. He's 8 for 23 in his career against Madison Bumgarner, a .391 expected batting average in there, 2 home runs out of those 8 hits. And he's another guy that's red hot at the plate, 29th best OPS in baseball over the last 2 weeks. He's hitting .347. He's also hitting in a premium lineup spot here for the Houston Astros, who I just think are going to absolutely smack Madison Bumgarner tonight. Give him an early exit, and I think that Jose Altuve scores a couple runs, drives in a couple, probably a high probability for a home run off of Madison Bumgarner, given the expected batting average of 2 homers in his career against him, a guy that he's very familiar with. I think that he is a very safe play here and definitely worth your money.
All right, last question here, dudes. Make it count. Hitter under $4,500 on this MLB slate. Kenny?
Yeah, it's a guy by the name of Jesus Sanchez. I'm sure we've talked about him all week, $2,800. No one in baseball has more homers over the last week with 5 than Jesus Sanchez. And you look at the peripherals for him, he's hitting the ball pretty hard, either average or above average in the league. He's a left-handed back going up against righty Will Crow. Will Crow has been awful to a 5.97 ERA. He's given up 5 homers in his last 4 starts. Righties are .312 against him. Really, any way you slice it, Will Crow's been bad. Jesus Sanchez has been good. He's $2,800, and you get a guy who, over his last 6 games, that has 8 hits in 24 at-bats. I think that he's just, let's just fire him up again, right? What's the harm here?
Eric, take your pick.
I'm going to go with another cheap power bat, and that's Bobby Dahlbeck at 3,300. He was always projected to have huge raw power and huge swing and miss issues. That's who he's been this season, but it's been much better for him lately. If you look at his first 90 games, he hit just .215, on base only .260 over that stretch, wasn't walking at all, and was striking out over 38% of the time. You basically have to be Joey Gallo to make it work with a strikeout rate that high, and he's not quite Joey Gallo. 11 homers in those first 90 games. Since that point, in 31 games, he also has 11 homers, so again, in just about a third of the playing time. He's hitting .330 over that 31 game stretch, and he's cut his strikeout rate all the way down to 24.1%, which is a completely normal number. So if you're seeing the ball like he is now, and while he's kept that raw power, I would expect good things to keep happening for him, especially tonight against Keegan Aiken, who I kind of liked heading into the season because he had a strikeout rate just over 30% in a short debut last year. That number has fallen all the way down below 20% this season. It's led to a 6.83 ERA. He's also a lefty, and Bobby Dahlbeck has crushed lefties this season. He's hitting .280 against them compared to just .217 against righties. So I think it's a perfect time to use a guy who's been hot for well over a month.
Eric, Kenny, phenomenal job today. Thank you so much for your help. Thank you so much to everyone at home who decided to put up with us for the past 60 minutes. We love you. We appreciate you. If you have more baseball questions about tonight's slate, again, every team in action, 15 games, you're in luck. Brendan Glasheen, Steve Buchanan, Matt LaMarca have a 5 o'clock MLB edition of the slate coming up on the DraftKings YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter pages, so keep an eye out there. Keep an eye out for the DraftKings Sportsbook and DraftKings all weekend long for the latest fun offerings ahead of Week 2 around the NFL. That's a show. Peace out, peeps.